They lowered my wife's casket and my daughter turned to the crowd, smirking. "This man doesn't deserve to cry for her," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps, whispers, silence. Not even the lawyer beside me spoke. She had never said words like this before. So why now? Then he handed me the envelope, sealed, official. But what they didn't know, I had the real deed in my coat. Who told her to humiliate me here? What did that envelope hide? And why was my name missing? The silence in the house was unbearable. No ticking clock. No television hum. No distant voice calling my name from the kitchen. Just the hiss of the old radiator and the sound of my breath. Tight, restrained. The kind of silence that comes after something has been torn out of your chest. I bent over the trash bin by the side porch and picked up the flowers. They were the same ones I'd placed gently over her casket just hours earlier. White lilies. Her favorite. The stems had been snapped and the petals bore the faint imprint of a boot heel. My daughter didn't just throw them away, she stepped on them. "I told you they'd stink up the house," came her voice from the doorway. No apology. No softness. She leaned on the frame with her arms crossed like this was just another Tuesday. "They were from your mother's grave," I said quietly, holding up what remained. She scoffed. She hated fuss. "You're the one turning all this into a circus." A circus. That's what she thought of her mother's funeral. That's what she thought of me. I looked down at the engraved watch on my wrist. The gold was slightly worn, but the second hand still moved in smooth, uninterrupted ticks. Mary gave it to me on our 30th anniversary. I hadn't taken it off since. "Why are you still here?" my daughter asked, her tone dipping low. "You said you'd stay one night." "It's been 3. I buried my wife," I replied. "This is still my home." She turned away with a sharp laugh, muttering something I couldn't quite hear. The door creaked open further, and then I saw him, her husband, standing in the hall with that same damn blank expression he always wore. Not a man, not a partner. Just a shadow backing up her every move. He didn't say a word. Just stared at me with that judgmental calm that made my skin crawl. Then she spoke again, louder this time. "You're clinging to a life that's over. This house, the money, all of it, it needs to move forward. We need space. For us, space? We're trying to start a family. That room you're sleeping in, that's going to be the nursery." The air left my lungs. Mary's sewing room. The place she spent hours in, humming to herself while the world outside went mad. The same room I found her in the night she collapsed. "She's barely in the ground," I said, my voice shaking. "And you're already erasing her." She stepped forward. "No one's erasing anyone. But if you won't move forward, that's on you. And if I won't leave?" Her eyes didn't blink. "Then we'll make sure you do." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I stepped back into the hall, past the photo of our family from years ago, when smiles were still real and arms wrapped tight. That photo had dust on it now. Like they didn't even see it anymore. Like they forgot. "Don't look so betrayed," she snapped. "This isn't your kingdom anymore. Stop playing the grieving king." I turned to her. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" She crossed her arms again. "You always made everything about you, even now. Mom's gone and somehow you get to be the center of attention. Well, not anymore." I looked again at the watch. The second hand hesitated for a moment, then ticked forward again. He finally spoke. Her husband. Just 2 words, quiet but razor sharp. "Time's up." She nodded toward my wrist. "That watch, sell it. We need room for the nursery." I didn't speak. I just closed my fist around the watch and wondered how many signatures it would take for them to erase me completely. The neighbor's dog barked twice right before the envelope. Hit my porch like a guillotine. Heard the mail slot clatter from the front hall. Just paper, I told myself. A bill, maybe. Nothing more. But something about the silence that followed, it felt loaded. Like the house itself was holding its breath. I opened the door and saw it lying there on the welcome mat. A white envelope. No stamp, just my name in thick black ink. To be opened immediately. I bent down, knees cracking, and picked it up. My hands knew before my mind did. It wasn't a card. It wasn't sympathy. It was something colder. I opened it and the words hit like ice water. Notice of intent to vacate. Effective in 10 days. Signed by co-owners, Rachel Monroe and Evan Monroe. They didn't even have the decency to hand it to me themselves. I stood frozen at the doorway as a shadow passed by the hedge. Old Mrs. Carter from next door had paused during her morning walk. Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my hand, then to my face. She didn't wave. She just kept walking. The next time I saw my daughter, she was in the kitchen with a cup of green tea and her phone in hand. She didn't even look up when I stepped in. "I got your letter," I said. She sipped. "Good. This is my house. It was. I built this place. Every beam, every wall. Your mother painted that door red. And now it's going to be soft gray," she replied, scrolling through something. "More modern." "Evan says it makes the house look bigger." I stared at her. "You're repainting my wife's door?" She finally looked up. "It's not your door anymore, Dad. You don't even own it. Mom signed the new deed. It's in both our names now." I swallowed hard. Mary would never do that. She did. Her voice was too even, rehearsed. "She knew you couldn't handle this place alone. She wanted us to help." "Help?" I laughed bitterly. "By kicking me out?" She stood up then. "We've talked to a lawyer. Evan's cousin, real estate specialist. It's all legal. If you won't leave peacefully, we can force it." The word force settled like a storm cloud in my chest. "You want to drag your own father out by the law? I want what's best for the future. You had your time here. It's ours now." That night I packed a small duffel bag and walked out onto the porch. I didn't leave. I just sat on the top step and waited for morning. That's when the fallout began. The next day, I stood outside with the envelope still in my hand, trying to gather the nerve to call my old lawyer when Mr. Harris, the postman, walked by. He slowed, looked at me, and gave a small nod. "Heard the news," he said quietly. "News? That you're moving out. Rachel told the Carters yesterday." I felt the world tilt slightly beneath my feet. "Already?" He gave a shrug. "Said you were ready to retire somewhere warmer?" Lie. That was a lie. Across the street, two women walking their dogs paused mid-chat to glance over. One of them whispered something and smiled. Not friendly, and there it was. The community reaction. No one asked me. No one heard my side. Just Rachel's version. Clean, rehearsed, fake. Inside the house, Evan watched through the living room window with that same smug look. The curtain twitched and dropped. I sat back down on the step, envelope on my knee, and looked at the gold watch again. Tick. 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 "You're not going anywhere," I whispered. "Not until I find out what you two forged. And who helped you do it." Because there was one thing they didn't know, not yet. Mary kept a second file. I'd never opened it. I didn't want to until I was ready. But now I had nothing left to lose. But when I opened her desk drawer to find the file, I discovered something else instead. An envelope I didn't recognize, addressed to a lawyer I thought was on my side. My ATM card was declined for a $9 coffee and a bagel. I stood there, holding up the line at the corner cafe while the teenage cashier gave me that awkward, almost pitying smile. She tried the card again. And again. Same result. "Do you maybe want to try another one?" I did. And that one didn't work either. The card hadn't expired. I knew that much. I checked it just last week while paying for the last of Mary's hospice bills. There should have been enough for 100 bagels, not just one. I left without the coffee, and the walk home felt like a blur. My hands shook. Not from age, but from dread. When I finally reached my small home office, I pulled out the binder, my retirement documents, bank statements, joint accounts. Mary and I had kept everything organized. She was meticulous like that. But something had changed. The most recent statement showed a withdrawal I didn't recognize. Then another. Then 10 more, $38,000 gone in 3 weeks, and there it was, transferred to a new account. One I didn't recognize, but the name on the transfer authorization? Rachel Monroe, my daughter. I sat back in my chair, watched ticking loudly in the stillness. Tick. She didn't even ask. Tick. Did she think I wouldn't notice? Tick, or worse, did she think I didn't matter? I opened the drawer Mary kept locked for years. I'd respected her privacy even after she died, but not now. Not when everything we built was being gutted from the inside. Inside were receipts, old letters, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope. I tore it open. Inside was a document I hadn't seen before, an investment certificate. It was in Mary's name, dated 6 years ago. A tidy little sum, enough to cover a down payment on a house, or a small inheritance. But someone had already cashed it. I scanned for the date. 2 weeks after Mary passed, I felt sick. There was a notary stamp, official, and again, a signature, My name. But I had never signed it. Suddenly, everything came together in one gut punch of clarity. The way the lawyer avoided eye contact last week, the way Evan always stood behind Rachel like a human mute button, the way the bank manager had brushed off my request to review joint activity. Sorry, sir. Your daughter already had full cosigner rights per last year's amendment. Amendment? There had never been an amendment. Not with me. I took the paper, held it up to the light, and stared at the signature. It was mine. And it wasn't. Close enough to pass for me, but off enough to be a crime. I walked into the living room and stood in front of them. Rachel on the couch with her phone. Evan pacing slowly with a soda can in hand. You forged my name, I said. Rachel didn't even blink. What are you talking about? You stole Mom's investment, drained the account, and used my signature to cash it. She turned her phone off. Dad, you're tired. You've been through a lot. You used my name. Evan stepped in. We didn't steal anything. Your wife, our mom, would have wanted us to be okay. I laughed bitterly. You used her death as a checkbook, Rachel stood. It's called protecting the family. You'd rather we struggle? You'd rather we raise kids in debt? She's not even cold, I said through clenched teeth. And you're looting her grave. You always thought money was love. It's not, she snapped. You're just angry we did what you wouldn't. You mean lie? Cheat? Forge your signatures? We did what had to be done. No, I said. You did what was easy. And now you'll pay for it. Her lips curled. You won't win, Dad, not in court. Not in this town. Everyone already thinks you're slipping. I turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. I held up the ticking watch. This isn't a symbol of time, I said. It's a countdown. Because tomorrow morning I was taking everything to the lawyer I thought was on my side. But first I needed to find out whose signature was really on those papers. The bank manager wouldn't meet my eyes. He only said, You authorized this, sir. I stood there with the forged document trembling in my hand, sweat collecting at the collar of my shirt. The air inside the bank's glass walls felt too clean, too sterile, like it could bleach away the truth. Let me speak to someone above you, I said again. The manager, Mr. Donnelly, shifted behind the desk, rearranging already straight papers. You'll need to contact the legal team for questions about power of attorney claims, Mr. Monroe. That's not what I asked, I replied. I asked who authorized this account activity. This signature is not mine. He finally looked up and then quickly looked away. We followed documentation submitted in accordance with state law. All authorizations were processed by your legal representative. My legal representative? Yes, sir, Mr. Adam Kinley. I froze. Adam Kinley wasn't just any lawyer, he was Mary's lawyer. He'd helped us with our will, our mortgage, even set up Rachel's first college fund. He was supposed to be family. A friend, I leaned in. You're telling me Adam submitted a power of attorney form on my behalf? Mr. Donnelly nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. Dated 6 weeks before Mrs. Monroe's passing. 6 weeks? I whispered. She was still alive then, he said, as if that helped. I left the bank in a haze, cars blurring past me like the world was speeding forward and I was standing still. I reached into my coat and clutched the ticking watch. It steadied me somehow, its rhythm cutting through the fog. But now I wasn't just angry. I was rattled, because Adam was the one person I never doubted. Back at home, I called his office. Straight to voicemail. I left a message. We need to talk today. Then I went to the file I had recovered from Mary's sewing room, the one with her handwritten notes on estate plans. There, tucked inside the final page, was a sticky note with one name written in her neat looping script. Call Davis, if anything ever happens. I didn't know who Davis was, but that was about to change. I drove to Adam's office anyway, some part of me still hoping he'd look me in the eye and explain this away. Maybe he made a mistake. Maybe Rachel forged something without his knowledge. Maybe. But the moment I walked in, I saw her, Rachel, sitting in Adam's waiting room, casually flipping through a magazine like she owned the building. She looked up and didn't even pretend to be surprised. Dad, she said, her voice like syrup over broken glass. What are you doing here? I should ask you the same. I'm finalizing a few things. Legal things. You wouldn't understand. I stepped closer. Where's Adam? She smirked. Out, but don't worry. We've got it covered. We? She rose to her feet and leaned close. You're not going to win this. You don't even know what you're fighting. Then she walked past me, heels tapping like a metronome, counting down my legacy. I turned toward the receptionist. Give me Davis's contact. I know he's on file. She hesitated, then after a pause, slid a business card across the counter. Harold Davis, estate litigation attorney, independent, private, outside the circle. When I called him that evening, his voice was calm, composed. Mr. Monroe, I've been expecting your call. I blinked. You have? I received a sealed letter from your wife 2 months before she died. Instructions not to open unless you reached out. Do you still have it? He paused. I haven't opened it yet, but based on what I've seen in the past few weeks, I think you'll want to. The silence between us was long. Then I said, meet me tomorrow, noon, my house. Before he hung up, Davis added one last thing. Adam Kinley isn't working for you, Mr. Monroe. He's been working against you for a very long time. The family lawyer the father trusted for decades has been secretly working with the daughter and son-in-law, filing forged legal documents, including a power of attorney before the wife died. And now I was about to read a letter from my wife. Written after the fake legal transfer. What had she known and who else had she warned? Before we continue, tell me, has someone you trusted for years ever chosen your enemy over you? What did you do when loyalty turned into betrayal? The church bulletin had her name, spelled wrong. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting blue and amber streaks across the pews. The same church where Mary and I were married. The same church where we had buried her last week. I hadn't planned to come back so soon, but something inside me said I had to be there. Not for God, for the truth. The pastor's sermon was about forgiveness. I didn't hear a word of it. Because halfway through the service, they passed out the weekly bulletin, and there it was, printed in bold under the Special Memorial Gifts section, in loving memory of Mary Monroe, gifted by Rachel and Evan Monroe, estate donors. My throat went dry. Estate donors? The crowd around me, neighbors, longtime friends, began murmuring as they read it. A few looked over at me. One woman gave a polite smile, but the kind that stings, like pity. Not one mention of me. Not one line acknowledging the husband who held Mary's hand every day for 42 years. Just Rachel and Evan, the thieves. After the final hymn, I made my way toward the altar. Pastor Nolan was stacking hymnals when he saw me. Tom, he said warmly, wasn't expecting you today. I saw the bulletin, I replied. Did Rachel organize the donation? He nodded slowly. She came in Thursday, said she and Evan were honoring Mary's wishes. Did she show you any documents? He hesitated. Actually, yes. He opened a drawer in the side pulpit and pulled out a manila folder. Inside was a scanned copy of Mary's supposed final request for a church donation, signed and notarized. I read the signature. My stomach turned. It wasn't Mary's handwriting. Not even close. And the notary listed, Adam Kinley. Of course. The trap was already in motion. This wasn't just about property anymore. They were laundering Mary's reputation. She didn't write this, I whispered. Nolan looked alarmed. Tom, if there's a mistake. She didn't write this, I said louder. That's not her signature. This whole thing's a lie. I didn't mean to raise my voice, but I did. People turned. The organist froze mid-note. 2 ushers paused at the door. Everything they're doing, I continued, now aware of the eyes watching, is fake. The documents, the transfers, that donation. It's a front for theft. My daughter is stealing my wife's memory. Rachel walked in at that exact moment. Perfect timing. She froze at the back of the church, her purse over one shoulder, sunglasses pushed up on her head. I turned and faced her. You forged another one, I said, holding up the fake donation request, in church. She walked forward, smiling like it was a school play and the audience needed calming. Dad, she said smoothly, you're grieving. Let's talk outside. I'm not moving, I snapped. Not until Pastor Nolan sees the truth. Pastor Nolan, now visibly tense, looked from her to me. Rachel, where did this come from? It was in Mom's desk, she replied quickly. Filed with the rest of the estate stuff. You mean the estate stuff you forged? I said, gasps. A few more heads turned. One man in the third pew whispered to his wife. Rachel's jaw tightened. This is exactly why we didn't want him handling things. I stepped toward her. You mean stealing things? Pastor, she turned to Nolan. My mom was dying. She wanted to give back. She told me this. Maybe the notary just did a quick stamp. It happens. I held out my phone. I have her real signature. From the hospital. She signed a birthday card the day before she passed. Want to compare them? Pastor Nolan stepped back. He didn't take the phone, but he didn't defend her either. In fact, he quietly took the donation envelope from the offering plate and set it aside, without saying a word. That told me everything I needed to. No, people were watching now. Whispers rippled like a current under stained glass and oak. One older woman muttered, I thought she looked too happy at the funeral. Another man said, Didn't the house used to be in his name? Rachel realized it too. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the doors. Before she left, she hissed under her breath, Keep pushing, Dad, and you'll lose everything. But she was wrong. Because that afternoon, Davis showed up at my house with Mary's sealed letter. And inside it was something that made everything unravel. I walked into the credit union and said just one word, Stop. The morning after the church incident, the house was still. Rachel and Evan had gone out early, probably to smooth over whatever mess I'd caused with the pastor. But I didn't care. The time for shame was over. The time for war had begun. I sat alone in Mary's old chair, clutching the sealed envelope Davis had brought the day before. It had her handwriting on it. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before I tore it open. Inside was a 2-page letter, and a single photocopy of a document I hadn't seen in years. The letter was dated 2 months before she died. Her handwriting was shaky, but still hers. It opened with the words, If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop them in time. My fingers tightened around the paper. She'd known. She knew Rachel and Evan were circling like vultures before her final breath. She'd overheard them whispering about restructuring assets. She had tried to confront them, but every time she did, they spun lies about caring for the family, about making sure I wasn't alone. They think you're too soft, but I know you. You built this family. You can rebuild it again, without them. The second page was a scanned form, an old cosigner authorization from our original retirement account. Mary had quietly retained full revocation rights. That meant I could freeze the account. Not all our money, but enough. And I knew exactly where to begin. I walked into the credit union an hour later, wearing my old tan jacket, the one Mary used to call indestructible. I clutched the folder under one arm and kept my voice steady as I stepped up to the counter. Tom Monroe, I said. I'd like to restrict access to joint account 8894. The teller blinked. You're one of the signers? I nodded and slid over the scanned document. She disappeared into a back room. 5 long minutes later, she returned with a manager. Mr. Monroe, he said gently. We just need a verbal confirmation. One word. I looked him dead in the eye. Stop, he typed something. The screen flickered, and just like that, the funds locked. No withdrawals. No auto payments. No transfers. I had done it. Rachel and Evan's money pipeline. Cut off. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. My watch ticked steadily on my wrist. But something about it felt off. I looked down. The second hand wasn't moving. I tapped it. Nothing. The battery was dead. I took it off, held it in my palm, and stared. It was like Mary had paused time herself, just long enough for me to act. Now the ticking had stopped. Right after my first strike, I didn't see them return home. I only heard the shouting. From inside the house, Rachel's voice rose like a fire alarm. What do you mean it's frozen? Evan, I don't know. He must have gone behind our backs. You said the lawyer fixed all this. Well, guess what? Maybe we missed something. I walked inside slowly, holding the dead watch like a holy relic. Rachel turned on me like a blade. You did this. I did. You had no right. I had every right. Mary gave it to me. She pointed a trembling finger. That money was for the mortgage, for the baby, for your greed, I said flatly. Let's not pretend. Evan stepped forward. This isn't over. I stepped closer, just inches from his smug face. No, it's not. But now the ground's even. Rachel stared at the watch in my hand. That's dead, she said, almost with satisfaction. I looked at her, then at the watch. No, I replied. It's resting, just like Mary. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. You froze the wrong account. The police will visit tomorrow. And I knew. Rachel and Evan weren't done. They were coming harder now. If your child cut you off financially and used your name to do it, would you fight back like I did or let it go? Let me know in the comments. Red and blue lights stained my window before the sun was even up. I was pouring my first cup of black coffee when I saw the patrol car. No siren. No rush, just quiet intent. They parked right in front of the house where the whole neighborhood could see. Curtains shifted across the street. Old Mr. Harper paused mid-dog walk. The mail lady stopped sorting. The shame was loud, even without a sound. By the time I opened the front door, 2 officers were already walking up the path. One young, one older. Both professional. Both unreadable. Mr. Thomas Monroe? The younger one asked. I nodded. That's me. We're responding to a report of financial misconduct. We'd like to ask you a few questions. May I ask who filed the report? The older cop answered. Your daughter, Rachel Monroe. Of course she did. I stepped aside and let them in. My palms were dry, no guilt, just steel. They sat across from me in Mary's living room. The furniture hadn't moved in 20 years, but everything else had. Your daughter alleges unauthorized interference with joint financial accounts, the young officer said. She claims you tampered with funds intended for shared family use. By shared family use, do you mean the money she took from her mother's private investment account? I asked. The officer blinked. Are you saying she transferred funds without your consent? I'm saying she forged my signature and I have proof. I handed them the scanned document from Mary's letter and a copy of the notary record from the fake church donation. The older officer examined it for a long moment. Who notarized this? Adam Kinley, I said. The younger one looked up. The same lawyer listed in the POA filing? I nodded. That got their attention. May we take these with us? The elder asked. You may. I also have someone you should speak to. Mary's secondary legal contact. Harold Davis will reach out. They stood. Professional, but no longer cold. Mr. Monroe, the older cop said gently. Can I ask you something? Off record? I nodded. Why didn't your wife come forward about all this while she was alive? I looked down at the silent watch in my palm. She tried, but no one listened to her. So she left me instructions instead. They nodded again and left quietly. But the damage had already been done. By noon, 3 neighbors had stopped by, not to ask how I was, but to look. One woman said, We saw the lights this morning. Is everything okay? They didn't want the truth. They wanted the drama, and Rachel had delivered it to their doorsteps on a silver platter. That evening, she returned home with a smirk and shopping bags in her hands, like nothing had happened. I stood in the hallway as she passed me, her eyes flashing like knives. You really called the cops on your own daughter? They came on their own, she laughed. You won't win this, Dad. Even if you're technically right, no one wants to see the old man kick his pregnant daughter out. Pregnant? I asked quietly. Her silence said more than a yes ever could. I see, I said. Well, that explains the timing. Evan stepped in. This has gone too far. Drop the act. Hand over the house deed. You're already losing the narrative. The narrative, I repeated. Is that what Mary's life was to you? A story you get to rewrite? Rachel stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. You don't scare me. You should be scared, I said. Because you pushed the wrong man. And then I walked away. I opened the drawer where I kept the watch and gently lifted it from the cloth wrap. Then I placed it on the table next to Mary's old Bible. It wasn't ticking. But I was. The next day, the police officer returned, not with questions, but with one simple line. Did your wife ever mention a second will? And I knew then. The war had just entered its final phase. The pastor paused mid-sermon, his eyes locked on me in the back row. I hadn't planned to go back to church. Not after what happened last time, but when Pastor Nolan called me personally and said, Tom, I found something in the archives I knew I had to return. That morning I wore my best shirt, the one Mary liked. I polished my shoes. I even combed back what little hair I had left. The church was full. People came early. Word had spread fast. I didn't sit up front. I didn't need to. When the organ quieted and Pastor Nolan stepped up to the podium, the room was too quiet. It wasn't reverent, it was bracing. He looked at the congregation, then at me. This morning, he began, we were going to speak on humility. But something else needs to be addressed first. He lifted a small folder from behind the pulpit. Before she passed, Mary Monroe came to me privately. She handed me this envelope and said, "If anything happens to my husband after I'm gone, if people start twisting my words, read this aloud." Gasps, murmurs. Rachel, sitting near the front, sat bolt upright. Pastor Nolan continued. I hadn't opened it, not until this week. I prayed over it, and now I understand why she asked me to wait. He opened the letter and began to read. To my husband, Tom, if they're turning the town against you, this is for you. To those listening, I never gave Rachel or Evan control of anything. Not our house, not our money, not our story. If my signature appears on anything dated after March 3rd, 2024, it is a forgery. I was already too weak to hold a pen. I begged them to stop. I told them the house belonged to Tom, but they wouldn't listen. So I wrote this. For him, for you, for the truth. The air in the church snapped, people turned. Heads swiveled toward Rachel like a storm wave. She stood abruptly. This is fake. He made her write that. The pastor didn't flinch. This was witnessed by me, sealed in my office. And here's her real signature, he said, holding up a church ledger page. Compare it yourselves. Rachel's face drained of color. This is slander. She didn't even like being dramatic. She was desperate, I said, rising slowly from the back pew. And you made her feel like she had no voice. Evan tried to pull her down. Sit down, but she didn't. She bolted out the church door. In front of God, her neighbors, and 100 watching eyes. Mary had left a secret letter with the pastor, directly refuting every claim Rachel and Evan made. The community now sees the truth, publicly, finally, irreversibly. I stayed seated as the whispers swirled. One man stood. You mean to say, Tom was telling the truth the whole time? Another woman muttered, and we all just let it happen. Then someone clapped, just once, then again, soon. The room echoed with the sound of hands, not applause, but recognition, not celebration, but correction. That evening, I walked past the diner. Inside, I saw the banker who denied my request weeks ago. He looked up from his coffee and gave me a nod, not out of pity, but respect. On my porch, a small envelope had been slid under the door. Inside was a note, scribbled in haste. Dad, I didn't know she'd read it. I didn't think it would go that far. Please, just talk to me. Rachel, I folded it once and tossed it into the fireplace. Because now I had one more card to play. The sealed bank account Mary left hidden. The one not even Rachel knew about. And tomorrow I was meeting with my new lawyer. Ever kept something hidden? Just in case your family betrayed you? What would you do with a letter from the grave that could destroy someone's lies? I handed the folder to the new lawyer. His hands trembled as he read. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into Harold Davis's office. Not a skyscraper downtown. Just a modest brick building behind the hardware store. The kind of place where truth still had weight. I didn't sit down immediately. I placed the folder on his desk first. Read everything, I said. Then tell me what we can do. Harold flipped through the papers. Slowly at first, then faster. Forged signatures. Power of attorney filed after Mary was too weak to speak. The church letter, he read it twice. The final page was Mary's revocation clause, handwritten and initialed. When he looked up, his eyes weren't lawyer sharp. They were human. Tom, he said quietly. They've boxed you in, but they left one side open. Because they got greedy. I leaned forward. What side? They filed all their claims under joint authority. But Mary never added Rachel as full executor. That means she never had the right to amend the deed, so the house? Still yours, he confirmed. If we move now, we can file for an injunction and force a freeze on all property transfers. By the time this hits court, you'll have standing, I nodded. File it. He didn't waste a second. Typed, printed, signed. 2 hours later, the injunction was logged. 3 hours after that, the sheriff delivered it, straight to my front door. Rachel opened it while I watched from the kitchen. Her lips moved as she read. Then came the explosion. You filed an injunction. I stepped out slowly. No, Mary did. I just followed her instructions. You can't do this, she snapped. That property is ours. Not anymore. Evan grabbed the paper from her hand. This says you froze all transfers, including the second refinancing we applied for. Yes, he turned pale. That's fraud! No, I said calmly. What you did was fraud. What I did was correction. Rachel stormed into the kitchen, slammed her phone on the counter. I'm calling Adam. You mean the disbarred lawyer, I said. He was suspended this morning. Her hands froze mid-dial. Check the state bar. He's done. Outside. A UPS truck pulled up. The man stepped out and handed me a small brown box. Inside was a watch battery. I didn't order it, but there was no note. Only the label. Return address. Mary's lawyer. Sent 3 weeks ago. She must have arranged it before she passed, like she knew this would be the moment. I took the watch from the cloth drawer where it had been sleeping. Slid open the back. Inserted the battery. Click, tick, tick, tick. It was alive again, so was I. That evening, Davis called. I also found something else, he said. A secondary account Mary opened in 2021. Completely in her name. No co-signers. Meant for rainy days. It has nearly 60,000 in it. I didn't speak. You're the sole beneficiary. I still didn't speak. Tom? He asked. You still there? Yes, I whispered. Just thinking how quiet the world gets when your enemies realize you're not the fool they thought. The next morning, a real estate agent knocked, asking if I was really selling the house because Rachel had already listed it. And that's when I realized they were trying to cash out before the court date. The real estate agent knocked, cheerful and clueless. Is this the property going up for sale? I didn't answer right away. He stood there in a blue blazer, clipboard in hand, looking down at his paperwork like it would magically explain the confusion. I'm sorry, I said. Who gave you permission to list this house? Rachel Monroe, he replied. She said she was the primary homeowner. And she signed a contract? Yes, just last Friday. Said it needed to sell fast. I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me. There's a court injunction on this property, I said. No transfers, no sale, and certainly no listings. The agent paled. She didn't mention that. No, I said, I bet she didn't. Rachel wasn't home when the agent left, but Evan was, sitting on the couch watching an old basketball game like it was 1997 and nothing mattered. Evan, I said. He didn't look up. You tried to sell the house, he shrugged. We're tight on cash. You mean you burned through stolen funds and now you're panicking? His knuckles whitened on the remote. She said it was handled. He muttered. She lied, I replied. To you, to me, to this town. And now she's about to lose everything. He stood up, taller than me but hollow. If this goes down, it's not just her. I lose everything too. I stepped closer. You already lost. You just don't know it yet. That night, I sat in Mary's sewing room and opened her last journal. On the inside cover, she'd scribbled something years ago. A house without peace is just a structure. I closed the book and looked around. She had kept peace, and they had shattered it. The next morning, the first call came from the bank. Rachel's loan application for a business startup was denied due to fraud flagging. Her name had been flagged across multiple systems following the church letter revelation. At noon, her car was gone. Evan's too, but around 2 p.m., a tow truck arrived and hauled away the second SUV, one they hadn't made payments on in months. By 3 p.m., I received a call from Davis. You'll want to sit for this, he said. Go ahead. Evan just got terminated from his firm. Conflict of interest. They reviewed his involvement with Adam Kinley and the forged deeds. It didn't go well. I exhaled. Also, he continued, your daughter's credit cards were frozen. She tried to pull funds from a shared community account, one that wasn't hers to touch. So what happens now? Now, Davis said, they get to feel the silence you've lived with for weeks. I went to the local diner that evening, not for food, but because I knew the town would be there. And they were. Bankers, teachers, retired neighbors, even Mr. Harper from across the street. I didn't have to say a word. As I stepped through the door, they looked up, and this time, they nodded. Some stood. No whispers this time, no curiosity, just quiet acknowledgement. I slid into a booth in the back. The waitress brought me a black coffee without asking. You doing okay, Mr. Monroe? She asked softly. I will be, I said. Soon. Back at the house, Rachel was waiting. Alone. No Evan, no car keys. No makeup, just her, sitting on the porch steps with a face full of fear and regret. She looked up when I approached but said nothing. I stepped past her, opened the door, and paused. "You have something to say?" "I didn't know it would fall apart this fast," she whispered. "That's the problem," I said. "You thought the fall would be slow. She didn't follow me inside, she just stayed there. Quiet now." Finally. And the next day in the mailbox I found a letter, handwritten by Rachel. Inside it, a request I never thought she'd make. "Will you come with me?" "To the lawyer's office?" The waitress stopped refilling her cup, just to listen. The diner wasn't particularly busy that Thursday afternoon, but the air inside felt thick. Thicker than usual. Rachel sat across from me in a corner booth. She chose the seat that faced the window like she couldn't bear to look at anyone. She wore sunglasses, though it wasn't bright. Hair tied back, no makeup. She looked smaller. Not physically, emotionally. Broken people shrink like that. I set the envelope she gave me on the table. "You said you wanted to talk," I said. She nodded, but didn't speak right away. "I went to the lawyer this morning," she finally whispered. "What for?" "To see if I could reverse anything. Undo the damage." "And?" They laughed. Her voice cracked. "Said it's all documented. All public. They showed me articles from the paper, comments from the church. Even the courthouse clerk made a joke about us." I didn't say a word. She pulled something from her purse. A wrinkled printout. On it, a forum thread. "Daughter steals grieving father's house. Greedy millennials ruin another parent's life. Shame on them. Man built that home." The headlines weren't dramatic. They were devastatingly true. "Everyone hates me," she said. "No," I said calmly. "They just finally see you." A nearby table went quiet. The waitress who had been pouring coffee stopped halfway to refill Rachel's mug. Eyes turned. Slowly, subtly. Rachel noticed. Her shoulders hunched forward. "Dad, I know I ruined everything." "I do." I watched her for a long moment, then wordlessly, I reached into my coat pocket and placed the gold watch on the table between us. She looked at it like it might burn her. "It's not ticking," she said. "I know." "Why bring it?" "To remind you that not everything broken gets to come back." Her eyes welled. "Is there anything I can do?" "Why are you really here, Rachel?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." That was the line, not "I'm sorry," not "I miss Mom," not "I was wrong." Just, "I need something again." I leaned forward. "You stood over your mother's grave and humiliated me." You forged her signature, drained her savings, tried to evict me, and stood silently while your husband nearly ruined my name in court and on the street. I know." "No, Rachel," I said. "You don't, because if you did, you wouldn't be asking to sit here like this diner is some therapy booth." "I'm trying," she whispered. I looked around. People were watching now, pretending not to, but clearly listening. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt seen, because they weren't watching me anymore. They were watching her. After a long silence, I stood up, left the envelope on the table. "Left the watch too," she looked up. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Whatever you want," I said. "It's dead, like Mom's trust." And I walked out. Outside, the wind cut across the parking lot. Sharp, clean. Harold Davis was waiting in his car. He rolled down the window as I approached. "She say anything useful?" "No," I said. "But she said it in front of a dozen witnesses." "Good. She's unraveling," I added. Finally, Davis nodded. "The court date's in 6 days. And by then the whole town will know what kind of daughter she really was. Because in 6 days she'd be sitting in front of a judge, watching me read Mary's real will aloud. And this time, there'd be no one left to lie to." The courthouse was silent except for the sound of one clock ticking. They made us wait in the hall for 27 minutes. Rachel sat at the far end of the bench, flanked by a public defender she'd only met the night before. No Evan. He'd left town 2 days earlier. Couldn't handle the spotlight anymore. Or the shame I sat alone. No need for a lawyer this time. Harold Davis would handle the paperwork, but the next few minutes? That was mine. In my hand, the watch ticked again. I had replaced the battery the night before. A quiet ritual. Not for Rachel, for Mary. She deserved to hear this. When the clerk finally opened the courtroom door, the sound echoed like a church bell. Everyone turned. Pastor Nolan was in the gallery. So was the bank manager. the real estate agent. Even the waitress from the diner had shown up. They weren't there for Rachel. They were there to see it end. The judge was sharp-eyed, gray-haired, and clearly already caught up on the town gossip. This hearing, she began, concerns property title disputes, contested will authentication, and abuse of legal power of attorney. She looked to Rachel. Ms. Monroe, do you still maintain your claim on the deed? Rachel didn't speak. Her lawyer whispered something. She nodded slightly. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned to me. Mr. Monroe, do you have the original documentation? I stood slowly, reached into my folder, and handed her Mary's real will, handwritten, notarized, dated a full month after the forged documents were submitted. This is her voice, I said. Everything else was noise. She read it carefully, so did Rachel's lawyer, his face falling line by line. To my husband, Tom, this house is yours for as long as you live. To my daughter, you broke something sacred. I leave you only this, an opportunity to remember what honor feels like. To the town, I'm sorry I waited too long to speak up. The judge looked up. Is this the same handwriting we received from the church? Yes, I said. Same pen, same paper, same truth. The courtroom was still. Rachel wiped her eyes but said nothing, and then I stepped forward again. One more thing, Your Honor, I said. I opened a second envelope. Inside was a property reassignment form. Signed, filed, sealed. I am transferring the deed to the Monroe family house, I said, but not to Rachel, not to myself, to the Mary Monroe Foundation, a charitable shelter for single mothers and widows in our county. Effective immediately, gasps. From everyone. Even the judge blinked. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her lawyer whispered, He gave it away. The father doesn't keep the house for himself. He donates it in Mary's name, removing it from Rachel's reach forever and transforming it into a legacy she can never claim or rewrite. I looked at Rachel one last time. This house was never yours, I said. You treated it like a prize, but it was a promise. She shook her head, tears running silently. You think this is noble? She whispered. No, I replied. This is justice. The judge cleared her throat. All claims are now closed. The property is no longer contested. The Monroe home now legally belongs to the nonprofit trust. This case is resolved. The gavel hit the bench. It was done. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked for comment. I said nothing, just showed them the plaque that would hang on the front porch. The Mary Monroe house, for every woman who's been pushed out. Pastor Nolan stepped up beside me. You did right by her, he said quietly. I nodded, then reached into my pocket and held up the watch, still ticking, still mine. But as I turned to leave, Rachel stood alone at the base of the courthouse steps. No cameras, no friends, just one question in her eyes. What do you do when your last lie is too heavy to carry? She knelt on the porch steps, rain in her hair, her voice barely a whisper. I hadn't heard from her in 4 days. Not since the courthouse, not since I handed away the last thing she ever wanted to control. The house sat quiet now. It wasn't mine anymore, but the foundation hadn't moved in yet, so I remained for one final weekend, to pack Mary's things properly. With reverence that night the rain came heavy, a southern kind of rain, the kind that smacked rooftops and soaked through memories. I was in Mary's sewing room, folding the last of her scarves. When I heard it, the knock, 3 soft thuds, I opened the door, and there she was, Rachel, on her knees, soaked to the bone, mascara trailing like she hadn't slept in days. Please, she said. Can I come in? I stepped back but didn't move aside. She stared up at me. Just 5 minutes, her hands trembled. Her voice shook. I know I don't deserve anything, she continued, but I have nowhere to go. Evan's gone. My friends have vanished. Even my boss blocked my number. All I have left is this. She held up the watch, wrapped in cloth. I fixed it again, she said. Replaced the battery myself. I just wanted to return it. I took it, unwrapped it. The second hand ticked, but it didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt like a circle completing itself. You always thought this place was a prize, I said, but you never saw what it cost. I know, she whispered. And I was wrong. She stood slowly. Her eyes met mine. If I could go back, but you can't, I said. The silence between us held more than tears. She tried to smile. I heard what you did with the house. Mom would have loved that. She's the one who left the idea in her journal. I didn't read that far, Rachel said. I was too focused on the will, she exhaled. What happens now? I looked at the house, the porch, the lights I hadn't replaced in years. You leave, I said. You start over somewhere far away, and you never take shortcuts again. She nodded slowly. And if I write? I'll read it, I said. But don't expect replies. Her eyes welled again, but she didn't collapse. She didn't beg harder. For once, she accepted the line. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. I believed her. But I wasn't going to let her back in. The next morning, I watched from the window as she loaded her car. Not much left. A few boxes, her phone, a jacket that used to be Evan's. She looked at the porch one last time, but didn't approach it. She got in and drove off, slow, steady, no last-minute drama, and as her car disappeared over the hill, I turned the watch over in my hand, the inscription still there, still true, to the only one who stayed. I wrapped it one final time and placed it back into the drawer beside Mary's folded scarves, not because I was done with it, because it had finished its purpose. Now all that remained was one last stop, Mary's grave, and this time, I would go not as a man defeated, but as a husband who kept his promise. This time I stood at her grave alone, with peace in my chest and no one behind me. The cemetery was quiet. The fall wind had started to turn sharp, rustling through the trees with a gentleness I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I was finally still enough to feel it. I stood before her headstone, just me and the watch in my coat pocket. The rest had been settled. The house now had new tenants, 2 women and a young child. The first residents of the Mary Monroe house. They didn't know the full story yet. Maybe one day I'd tell them, but not today. Today was for Mary. I knelt down, brushing a leaf from her name. The stone was clean. Someone had been here. I suspected Pastor Nolan. I pulled the watch from my coat. It ticked softly, stubborn and steady, just like she'd been. I kept my word, I said aloud. No one was around to hear me. That was the point. I gave it back to the people who needed it. I didn't keep the house. I didn't keep the money. I just kept your voice in my head long enough to survive what they did. A breeze answered. Gentle. Not like before. When grief had howled through this place, this breeze was forgiveness. I stood and pulled out one final object. A small engraved brass plaque. I'd had it made the day after the court verdict. I walked to the oak tree behind her grave, knelt at the base and pressed the plaque into the soil beside the roots. Legacy belongs to the ones who don't betray it. The sound of tires crunching on gravel made me glance up. A few cars had pulled in behind me. Pastor Nolan, Mrs. Carter from next door, the banker, the waitress from the diner, even the police officer who asked about the second will. They didn't crowd me. They stood respectfully behind near the fence, silent, still. One by one, they removed their hats, folded their hands, bowed their heads, not for Mary, for me, not for the dead, for the one who stayed behind and stood up. That night, I sat on the porch of the cottage Davis helped me rent just outside town. Modest, clean, no memories to fight with. A letter arrived 2 days later. No return address. Inside, a folded photo of Rachel as a child. Covered in glitter glue, an old school project. I recognized it instantly, written on the back, trying to remember who I was. I hope you can too. Or I placed it in Mary's old photo album, but didn't call her. Some redemption has to be earned in silence. The following Sunday, Pastor Nolan asked me to speak after the service. I didn't prepare a speech, I just held up the watch and said, "Don't waste time fighting for things you can't carry to your grave. Fight for dignity, fight for memory, fight for the name that survives you." They stood and clapped, not loud, just long. The watch, Mary's gift, the pulse of the story, is placed on the mantle of the Mary Monroe house. Ticking, quiet, eternal. So now I ask you, if your daughter mocked you at your wife's grave, stole your home and rewrote your legacy, what would you do to take it back? If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood and still stood up for your name, like, subscribe and share the story. Drop your comment below. What would your legacy say if no one was left to defend it but you?